Another episode of Dualistic Unity Social has begun. And this is an episode that is followed by the call-in show. So I am very excited about that because the call-in show is always a lot of fun. I believe the last call-in show we had just a consistent lineup of people that were participating, joining in, sharing their stories, sharing their insights. I love call-in shows. They're always a lot of fun. But then again, we may have a couple of people come and air a grievance, possibly want to get into a conversation, go back and forth about something, in which case that could be fun too. So I'm looking forward to that. But I just wanted to give a quick shout out to everyone in the quote unquote community, basically everybody who's listening. Hi. We really appreciate you. I mean this. You know, we were in a group yesterday on Patreon, and this has happened a lot lately, not just on groups on Patreon, but people that we talk to, people that we know in the community, more and more, you know, they express a level of ease that they're picking up. You know, we talked to somebody recently who we've been, you know, going back and forth with, and he was saying, like, you know, I'm really looking at things in my life from a new place. And that means a lot. It really does, because it's not, yeah, you're right. It's, I'm really reassessing my life. I'm really taking the time to stop where I am, come back down to the ground, rather than get over-invested in things that I've been assuming for a long time, despite new information, but to actually just stop and reassess without judgment, with a certain degree of clarity, and then to move forward from there. And that sounds like the most reasonable thing to do, and yet it's so fucking hard, or at least it feels so fucking hard, because we're always trying to keep up. But I think what helps is to remember that a lot of what we're trying to keep up with isn't actually something we need to keep up with. A lot of it is chasing that sense of security. A lot of it is chasing that sense of certainty. A lot of what we do is just in preparation for moments that never come. Talking or thinking about conversations that may happen down the road, thinking about outcomes that may never come to pass. And so much of our time is lost in that. And because of that, we feel like we have no time. But I think that's the important part, is to ask yourself, how much of this do I really need to think about? How much of it is actually getting me somewhere versus making me feel like I'm getting somewhere, despite not?
Yeah, like invested in trying to control the future, you know, just focused on like having certain perceptions come up about some idea of how something might go, and then focusing wholeheartedly on trying to guarantee one way or the other, like in Star Wars, you know, Anakin's whole journey, like seeing bits and pieces of the future and then trying to control it and going mad and end up being, you know, self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of different ways. But yeah, the priority, I think, starts to shift as you take in new information, and even the whole, you know, conversation of being reality, being the universe, being what is. It's like that in itself, talking about that, recognizing that, doesn't really do anything for your life. Not that that's what it's all about, but it's when from that, it's like, okay, if that is the case, if I don't have to know, if I can't know how I'm doing, then why not, you know, have some degree of impact on my experience instead of just prioritizing how I'm doing, you know, measuring along the way. Like, you can go through your entire life, just the entire time, trying to keep tabs on how I'm doing. And it's all this internal journey towards, you know, maintaining that, as opposed to looking out there, you know, looking into reality and seeing like, okay, what can I do here? Irrelevant of how I do, if I focus on what I do, and that's always the priority, and not even need to ask the question of how I'm doing. It's like, I can never answer that, just keep going. And like, as that has shifted for me, it's definitely become, you know, it's at least you can feel more relaxed with things going into things. I think there's the potential there, but it's as the priorities shift, and then, you know, priorities are kind of maintained to some degree. And, yeah, organized. recognized.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm definitely glad that we have opportunities where we can see that we were working based off of an assumption, and that assumption caused us or influenced us to look at certain doors and certain avenues, right? And then when you see that you were working on an assumption, it almost feels like you want to say that the time was wasted, but it really isn't, because now you get to look at all of the information you had collected with fresh eyes. And you get to see that same information, how it could be used in a new way that's going to be most relevant to the moment that you're in instead of the moment you thought you were in. Because no matter how certain you were about that moment, you were so sure of, that wasn't that wasn't reality. That wasn't what was happening. So it's like, thank goodness, the bubble got burst, and you get to see the moment that you're actually in, instead of the thought that you were so zoomed in on that you couldn't see anything else other than that assumption. So it is very easy to think, you wasted time, but it's never wasted, because it's perfectly appropriate to the moment that you're in. And that's a great opportunity. And in that, there's an excitement, almost like an electricity that starts to you feel more sensitive to.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that, because it's like, oh, I thought I knew. I definitely didn't. I'm feeling a little uncertain. Things are being a little electric. It's exciting, but it's up to date. It's on the pulse. It's so current. It's like the bubbles burst and you're like, open the eyes. You're, shit, okay, I'm here, taking it all in. Hot damn, there's a lot happening. But I'm grateful and I appreciate that the bubble is burst, and there is some clarity to see things, to take in a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the interesting part about it, right? Is all we're ever saying, or all we've been saying throughout the podcast, and this is true since episode 1, is that there is an alternative way of perceiving existence as a whole, not just a part of existence, not in terms of like, what does God want versus what does God not want? What should we call it versus not call it, or anything like that? But from the ground up, an entirely different perspective of the world. And that perspective being one that, when you get the idea of yourself out of the way, when you realize you're not what you think you are, is just obvious. You're like, well, if I'm not what I think I am, and all division that I perceive comes down to what I think is there, then there's no division. And if there's no division, then all of a sudden you're not interacting with others anymore. Now you're interacting with an extension of yourself, not an extension of you, but an extension of you in the way that you are equally an extension of them. I think that's where people get lost in the idea that this is solipsism, because they're like, oh, you're saying everyone's you. It's like, yes and no. Yes, but I'm not saying that I'm me. It's a very difficult way to put it. I'm not saying me, the thing that you seem to be thinking I am, but me, the phenomenon of meanness. Me, the I that is the center of every living piece of existence. That me. And so it's really interesting, because you can't see any of that when you're under the assumption that you are what you think you are. You can't see that there is a different type of experience happening, because when you're interacting with other people, you can manipulate those people and lie to those people, and you can try to get them to think of you a certain way because that validates you, all of that. But when it's recognized that you're dealing with you, and you're lying to yourself, you're manipulating yourself, that that's a part of you that's experiencing the butt end of you being a dick, of you being selfish, and that some part of you is in there going through that. And that changes what it is. It changes what you get from it. Even if you do act selfishly after the fact, you're just like, oh, wow. Because then you'll see the parts of your life where you've experienced the same, because you can resonate. You can relate to the other person on a level that you could never relate to them when they were someone else. when they were the idea of them that you held on to. And so that's why it's so important to clear out these assumptions, to go right back to the ground level, which is, am I really what I think I am? Because that's an assumption, and it's one that we prove wrong all the time, every time we change, in fact.
Every single time. And so there really isn't a story that you can pinpoint, but in trying to have some sense of like knowing what's going on, you can kind of like focus on that. And that's all about how this thing I'm thinking about is doing. But without that, those priorities shift, and realizing there's a inevitable push and pull to reality. Like the more you're pushing on one side, it's like something's being experienced there, like the entire spectrum of, everything from, like first world countries to third world countries. There's a inherent connection to that. Like the more you're hoarding for yourself, the more impact that's going to have somewhere in some way. But if you're making it about you, then that's always going to be the priority. It's like, but me. But it's like, where does that get you? Where does that get you throughout your life? Feeling semi-comfortable and then dying anyway. It's like, why hold on so tightly to that, as opposed to prioritizing your experiences as you go? Because it's hard to really focus on both, like really prioritize your experience and just making the most of it over, when you are focused on yourself and how you're doing. Because it's like looking at this glass and not looking through it and just looking at it the whole time and trying to focus on that and how it's doing, instead of looking past it and just seeing like, okay, I'm not going to be able to know regardless, so I can keep going. And especially when it's interacting with yourself, like we were talking about yesterday with friendships. I was like realizing some stuff myself in my in my life, and with that experience of friendships, like being a friend, like what kind of friend would you want to be? And just like making that your priority is as basic and obviously logical as it sounds. It's like when it's really, really about you, you can lose track of that. Like, what can I be in this experience right here when it doesn't mean so much about me and I don't have to, prove myself? It's like, what can you do? A lot.
Yeah. It the imagery that came to mind as you were speaking was like finding old mental landmines and being able to see old triggers and old assumptions, and thinking like, when I find an assumption, especially an old one, and like, oh, I didn't realize that was still there. It almost feels like finding this relic. And sometimes they're newer, but as we're going along and you're feeling more sensitive and you're paying more attention, it's easy to not think that it is an assumption that you might be basing your choice off of, because the assumptions are they sound so convincing. They're so, it's so tempting to think that, oh, I know, I'm certain, but you're only ever certain based off an assumption. You're assuming that you know something, and because you're assuming that you feel that certainty. But that assumption, it can be, as explosive and as damaging as like a landmine is. And if you've forgotten that the landmine is there, you step on it, not knowing, or not noticing. It didn't register. You weren't sensitive to it. But I was thinking of just how much of an opportunity that is. Instead of being upset when I find like an old landmine, like, oh shit, we were making an assumption again. There's another. I was like, oh no, there's another one. Okay, didn't know that was buried there. Good, we didn't lose a leg this time. I'm glad we've got both legs, all our limbs. We're still good. Okay, be careful. It's still sensitive. Let's dig this fucker up and let's take a closer look at it. If you feel like it, if not, just noticing it is also just
sometimes it's like noticing once or twice and then being like, all right, this is here one way or the other, these assumptions as you see them, and then it's like, might as well take a good look at them. And it's like, again, those things, like seeing different aspects of yourself, like that, it can be uncomfortable, but like they were happening, they were playing out. You just weren't aware of them. And so like reverting into assuming, you know, that you should have caught it sooner, or you should have realized it sooner, or going through this whole story again, just another story of should, you know, should be doing this, should have done that, should be doing this right now. It's like that's always the thing, like that will become all that you see, instead of being able to see what's happening here, what's going on here, what's going on in the moment, in your experience right now. You can focus on shoulds and assume that will make you feel better by looking at it. It's like, no, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, like those are the things that pull you from where you're at, the experience that you're having.
Because it's
more
a
assumptions.
fictional world.
Yeah.
It's a fictional world. Like it exists within the potential of everything that could exist. So it's so funny that we get very caught up in it, like it's absolutely going to happen when it's not what's actually happening. But I wanted to take a moment just because, again, we have a call-in show today, which is going to be happening in less than 45 minutes. Where do you find it? Twitch.tv/Dualistic Unity. You can go to YouTube Live. It's another great place to go. If you have a question and you don't want to jump into the call-in show, but you would like us to answer that question, submit it on the Discord. So our community Discord actually has an Ask a Question section. And I know Jazz has set that up so that way it's easy for you to use. It's easy for us to read. The Discord is absolutely free, of course. So just check that out. If you can't use the QR code, go to dualisticunity.com and click on community. And that will take you right to the Discord where you can ask a question. Alternatively, if you're on Patreon, you can just send us a message or leave a comment, maybe underneath the post for the Tier 2 call that follows the call-in show. Just drop a comment there under the Tier 2 call with your question, and we will try and get to that. Or, and again, I'm just saying, or you could just call in. You know, you could call in, join us for up to 10 minutes, share your insight, participate in the episode, and help inform the discussion as a whole, because it's awesome. So we appreciate you, and I just want to throw that out there quickly. Aha! We have a question already, and I figure since, you know, this is the precursor to the call-in show.
Warm up, I like
it's the
that.
warm up.
It's
the warm up. Let's check
get
this
it
out.
going.
All right, what do we got? All right, hello guys. I hope you're doing great. Thank you.
Likewise.
I've been wondering if clinging to the present moment is a good way of developing being present as a kind of good habit, like being conscious of the breath. Now, that is an interesting question. Clinging to the present moment, I would say that that's difficult because anything that you're clinging to is an idea. So even the idea of the present moment isn't it. And so if you're holding on to this, like the present moment will save me, the present moment will save me, you're doing that idolatry thing that, you know, if you meet the Buddha in the road, kill it, right? So I would say that it's not necessarily about trying to be in the moment or clinging to the moment, rather than recognizing you are the moment. That the idea of yourself that's making you feel like you're in conflict, like you need to get into the moment, is actually the illusion. That's the thing that's making you feel like you're not in the moment. The journey to the moment is, in fact, what's making the whole thing rather difficult. And so I would say it's more something just allowing yourself to be, allowing yourself to actually surrender to what you are. And to answer the question, you know, can I really just let go yourself? To say yes. And then to just let go. Because you are the present moment. There's nowhere to go. But the illusion that you are not, the illusion that it's something to become, that's what we're letting go of. Or rather, that's what we have the option to let go of. And that just leads us back to what we've always been. Here and now.
It's like you really can't escape it. Like you can't experience anything else. Like you can't do it. And I don't know, I was just hitting in a way where it's like it's what's already happening. There isn't an additional thing. It's like, oh, you know, feeling like you're involved in a conversation or not, or like in it or out of it. And it's like you're always in it, and that thought that you're like out of it and need to get back in is what that wall is. Like straight up, the getting there, the becoming it, the doing the thing to get there, or to become free, or this has to happen. And you start to realize, I think, how many things you might have built up on that journey, like on that process, like the whole self-help, self-development sort of thing it's like the inverse of recognizing that there isn't this journey at all, and then experiencing life and letting that journey play out naturally based on being informed and sensitive to what's going on. And self-help is very much the inverse. It's like there's something wrong, but there's a way to fix it, and you won't be able to just be cool with yourself and be here and let go of the journey, which is all you got to do the whole time. Not, all you got to do, but like, it's simple, not easy necessarily, but at the same time is like, is that just a thing that's pulling away? Is it that fine of a line that even that story, that it's like a simple, not easy, blah, blah, blah. It's like all of that. And that's, I think, that acceptance, forgiveness of like, here, keep paying attention. It's like that fine of a line.
Yeah.
It's like, it can be tough, It's like, it's not to say that things aren't, but
that's why I was both and neither, right? Like, the reason I like simple, not easy is because it's a beautiful expression of the duality. It's like, it's simple all the time, in that you can't not be the present, right? You can't not be yourself. Like, none of that's a fucking thing, right? But on the other hand, you run across something that scares you, you immediately have to deal with the temptation to run to that idea of yourself, immediately run to that idea of control. And that's where the recognition that shit's hard to let go of, those concepts of yourself. That shit is hard, because again, in the same way it's hard for a young child who has their soother taken away. You might be like, you'll be okay, but it took you a long fucking time to learn that.
Yeah.
To them, that shit's traumatic. It's like, that was helping me get through life, motherfucker.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And you're just like, but you don't need it. You're strong enough. But they don't see it that way. We don't see it that way at the time. And so I love the both and neither thing, because it's simple, not easy, but it's neither of those, because they contradict each other. Like that's kind of the point. It's just what it is at the end of the fucking day. But we have no choice in using language but to give it a fucking story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's being able to use the story without actually assuming the story is truth. It's being able to use the tool without mistaking the description for the described.
And continuing on, like that process, that thought of being yourself, not being able to not be yourself. It means that there isn't a journey there either. Like the whole time of like having one idea and then jumping to another, or like assuming one thing and then to prove that you're, being yourself more. It's like you think it's another thing or a different thing, or there's a new identity or this identity or that identity. And the whole time you were being yourself. And so there's no one that you jump to that solves that process of jumping from one thing to another, like wanting to be more like an extrovert, like going from introvert to extrovert, or this to that, like this, someone who's not good at this to someone who's good at this. Like those jumps, those focuses on that journey is, again, like you're being yourself the entire time. There's not a point that becomes like, oh, now I'm more myself. Mm-hmm. It's like all you can do is express it right now, but it can't even fluctuate.
Yeah.
All the measurements are just conceptual fluctuations.
Yeah.
Right. And we're always expressing it. And so this moment is a mirror. It's always reflecting the priority or the assumption of the moment. And so when we're looking at, when we're looking at like how we're feeling, it's we want to say we know why, we want to say we know what's going on, but it's just our guesses, our assumptions, because we never really know why things are happening, and we're barely paying attention. So it's so funny to think that our descriptions could be accurate when we're only seeing a potential sliver. And then when I think about like the moment is reflecting where I'm at, or it's reflecting what I'm processing. I'm like, what's the mind, what's the self, and it's you brought up the introvert and extrovert, and I used to think that people were introverts or extroverts, and then I went from thinking that it's a spectrum and that people move on the spectrum, and now it's like, well, if everything is everything and everyone is just this moment is just all of existence in this moment, whether or not I can see it or not, then of course we would all be reflecting different things in different moments that we're experiencing. But it's
almost like introvert extrovert spectrum, and like we like our society kind of like fluctuates, like people are fluctuating on this spectrum.
Yeah,
it's just still so subjective,
right?
too.
And if everyone is you, but not you, the idea of if the you is just existence, then it's like, of course we're seeing everything from different angles all the time. It's almost like this moment is a rolling ball and I'm trying to memorize one part of the ball, and I can't memorize it by the time it's at the next part, and it's just rolling, and as it's rolling, the shape is changing, and it keeps changing because it's rolling, and as it's rolling, it's just evolving and changing, and I'm trying to memorize parts of the ball that I'll never see again because the moment will never be the same. It's always changing, and so it's trying to memorize a picture as it's changing before you. It's an impossible task, and yet we assume that it can be done because it makes us feel like we're doing something, but there's nothing to do. You don't have to.
It's like going around the ball, seeing it spinning around and being like, oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. I think that's it. Oh, no, that's it.
I'm that part expert.
All your assumptions. Exactly. Like, that's me. As it continues to spin and evolve and shift. It's like that video with all the balls inside of each other, and they're all like shifting in different directions, or the circles, but it's always shifting. So trying to pinpoint it, trying to be like, oh, now I know. Oh, now I know. It's always fleeting. Like, there's no way to settle on that ever, like with a thought, with a concept, with a guarantee, one way or the other, because it's constantly evolving. Like, we've sat here, done live streams a bunch of times, and like none of them have been like this. And even as I started saying that 5 seconds ago, it's now different too.
Of course.
It's now entirely different.
Yeah, by virtue of the fact we're all different.
Yeah.
We're all different, not to mention the microscopic differences in the room, in the environment outside the room, right? Because there's huge changes. Everybody outside is different. Like, this is a fundamentally different moment. And yet our brain is just like, but it's similar. Therefore, I can use the past to judge what I'm going to do next. It's like, but not with any degree of accuracy. And it's based on an old mentality that's no longer informed by new information. So it's almost like going back to a decision that you made in fucking grade 5 and then just doing it again without taking into account everything you've learned since grade 5. Like, that would be ridiculous. And when we look at it that way, you're like, yeah, that would be ridiculous. Like, right. But these decisions about your life you made a month ago discount all the shit you've learned since a month ago. Even today, your life is different than it was yesterday. You've learned shit. And if you're like, well, I don't know what I've learned, that doesn't mean you haven't learned. It just means that you haven't had the time, as we started the episode with, to stop and reflect on how much you've learned, to reassess what it is you've gone through, just to recognize that at the moment, a lot of your experience is really governed by your opinion of what you're going through. And it's when you have a moment to stop and get some space and let go of your opinion that you see more of what you've learned from what you've went through. But your opinion blinds you to everything. It's not like the lessons aren't there, but you can't see them when you're looking at your opinion of the experience that would lead you to that lesson. If you're like, I don't like that experience, you're not going to look for that lesson in it. You're not going to see that insight in it. You're not even going to want to give it any validity at all as a source of value in your life. It was unnecessary. I didn't like it. It was unpleasant. These people fucking did this shit to me, or something like that. It's like, that makes it impossible for you to turn that demon into an angel.
Yeah. And yeah, assuming, yeah, that there is some way to, yeah, I got nothing.
That's fair. We got a follow-up question though. I definitely chose the wrong words to use. There's no doubt that the present is inevitable, which is the self, but the perception of the present varies all the time. So how to enhance the presence? Well, I guess that's what I'm saying is that very need to enhance it is removing your attention from it.
Yeah.
Right? And the thoughts that are leading you to want to enhance that presence are thoughts that you're still committed to. Right? And you can't get out of that. That's the point. Like, you can't shortcut your way past the thoughts that you're still committed to that are causing the conflict and the pain that you're trying to escape through clinging to the present. They go hand in hand. There is nowhere to get. So the only way to enhance the present is to pay attention to it. But that means to address the distractions that you're still invested in and to be honest about them. Right? And to do that, you have to recognize that it's always about your relationship with here and now. You're invested in thoughts about yourself. You're invested in thoughts about the future. You're invested in thoughts about the past because you're afraid. You're afraid of uncertainty. You're afraid of being afraid. And it's not until you start to recognize that and accept that fear and to go through life with it, rather than trying to go through life getting somewhere, but to actually just go through life, that you really realize, like, there was never anything to do. That in fact, the urge to do something, to get somewhere, to have a journey at all, was just to escape the uncertainty that goes with the presence that our mind wants to idealize as a solution to all of our suffering, when in fact presence is risk. I mean, there's nothing more present than something that can fly, and flying is all risk. If you aren't present when you're flying, you're probably going to fall.
A component of that is how much faith you have in yourself. Like, even, when we're in these conversations here, like continuing to listen without, holding on to a thought about something that's said, to like try and maintain control. And that's like, seems like basic conversational, like it's listening, that's all it is. It's listening. And it's so nuts how, like, you can, if you try and control it, if you try and think like, oh, there's going to be something along the way, because you get to the end of someone talking and you don't have faith in yourself to like just speak, just say based on where it was, despite it being like it would have played out if you did just have faith and trust it, because it's that hesitancy, it's that question, it's that concern, it's that wonder. It's like, going into anything, it's like, how's this gonna end though? And you can't know that while it's playing out, while it's happening, while reality is playing out. Like, it's live, it's going on right now. If you want to try to maintain some sense of control as you go, instead of just continuing to pay attention and doing the sort of flying feeling, the whole sort of flying feeling, whatever the fuck that means. But if you continue to do that and try and maintain some sense of control, it's like you're always a step behind. You're always slightly cut off, slightly insensitive. And it so much of that stems from not really having faith in yourself to just show up. It's like, no, I need a plan. I need something set. Like, I even used to write so many notes for episodes, just in writing a thought down, because I didn't trust myself enough to remember that, or just jump in when there was, a gap in something. And it's just basic listening stuff. And it's like not prioritizing yourself and how you're doing so much, but more so prioritizing what are you doing right now. It's like listening, and that's it. And that's cool. That's more important than trying to maintain some sense of, I'm going to know how this ends. There's a lot less sensitivity there.
Oh, we can leave it.
Right.
And trying to know how it ends.
Studio adjustment. We appreciate your patience.
Please stand by for technical difficulties.
Exactly.
Right, but are you paying attention or panicking? And it's usually when we're panicking, it's because we're assuming that we did something wrong. And I you had said like, are you wondering like what to do next? And I was thinking about wonder and like how we feel like that doubt or curiosity. And the curiosity usually is when there's a little to no assumption, and the doubt is still that same kind of wonder and curiosity, but there's an assumption that it's risky, dangerous, uncertain, unpredictable, something negative, some kind of connotation that, it's uncontrollable, and we usually feel that doubt, but that doubt had a seed of curiosity inside of it, which was just a wonder of what's happening without it needing to become a problem. And I love the metaphor of, turning our demons into angels, and my mind translates that into, turning problems and seeing them as an opportunity, or it's this unsolvable burden that's an opportunity. You're not cursed, you're not stuck with a demon, and the angel of opportunity is always available to us, just like that genuine seed of curiosity is at the center of every doubt that you may have about what you can and can't do.
Well said. Absolutely. We are running down to the last 6.5 minutes here of this episode, and then we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back for the call-in show. We do have another question, but we will get to that question in the call-in show because it's a really good question, and it requires a well, not thought out, but it requires some time to address it. Let's just say it's well worth giving it the attention. I'm glad the last questioner enjoyed the answer. That's awesome. We really appreciate you being here and participating in this and warming us up for the Q&A episode. Of course, if you would like to join us in the next segment and actually be on the screen, you can be a participant in the call-in show for up to 10 minutes. A little timer on there, just letting you know how long you've got. If you'd like to chat with us, if you'd like to ask a question, go back and forth about something, if you'd like to just share a story, air a grievance, perhaps just filibuster for 10 minutes. It really is up to you. But it helps inform the conversation. It helps inform everything. I mean, all of these experiences, I guess that's what we're seeing. What we're saying is that we're all learning something from everything. And it's often not what we think we're learning. Often we think we're learning a specific thing when in fact we're learning more about ourselves. We do something that requires a little bit more time and attention. Hell, we do something that we do every day, but suddenly we're in a rush and we fuck it all up. Give you an example. The other day I was at the bank doing banking things, which is always kind of fun and frustrating, right? And some shit went wrong. I had to go to another bank. I'm looking at my map app. I'm mistyping fucking everything. And immediately I'm like, I'm rushing. And it's because there's a recognition that it's not just about getting the banking shit done. I also have an important lesson an important opportunity to learn a lesson about myself and my life and my existence as a whole right now. That when I'm not paying attention, when I'm rushing somewhere, when I think I need to be in control, when I think that things aren't going to work out because it's not going the way I want it to, all of that stuff, I lose all sense of alignment with reality. I lose all sense of efficacy and clarity. All of a sudden, I can't even type. Like, it's ridiculous how quick and obvious the switch is between trying to get somewhere and be something and stressing out accordingly versus just being what you are. Letting things happen as they do and doing your best moment to moment to moment. Not needing to get so caught up in it that you're rushing forward or hesitating out of fear, but to actually have that living sense of being here. And so it's important to recognize that life is an opportunity for us to learn far more than the things that we think we're learning, which often we just want to learn for a sense of control. And they're ultimately teaching us that control itself doesn't have the payoff that we think it does.
And we see that time and time again where it just doesn't pay off. It's you're frustrated and tense, and you're not able to, in participate in a normal conversation. You're not able to type. You're not able to do basic fucking things like a walk. Sometimes I'll be so stressed out that I'm like tripping over air, people, no rug, no step, no drink, sober on flat ground with flat shoes, and we're tripping over air because we're so caught up in an assumption, and we're not able to see that the control that we were banking on is not paying out in real time.
Nope. Never has. And the amount of like how much you can try, and it's like trading so much of your experience for that desire to maintain some sense of control. Like it kind of, in a sense, it feels like it runs deep, but then it isn't at all. It's still a moment to moment thing, and it varies based on different experiences. It's like, well, doing this, like, even at the restaurant the other day, we were like talking about how if someone suggests you a meal to eat, and it's like,
oh my
if
goodness,
you really
yes,
want to maintain control, it's like, no, I'm not gonna pay attention to what you're telling me to eat. I'm gonna choose what I want.
And in fact, I'm never gonna have that thing that you recommended ever.
Yeah. Trying to control
I'll
me?
show you.
Trying to control me? No, and it was just like a recommendation. You were like, I had this one
this
before,
is delicious.
and it was all in good fun, joking around. But like, it's funny how the different ways that we can try and maintain control, and the physical response, like your body feels it. Like you can feel it in the tension in your stomach, in your throat sometimes. Like so many parts of your body can physically respond, and it's like, what experience are you trying to prioritize? Like an experience where you control enough to the point that you can relax a little bit. Like, where is that priority? If it's not relaxing right now, then it's like, and being able to live like that, because you can. It doesn't have to be the should, the push, the tension all the time to force yourself to get things done. It's like kind of settling back a bit, and then being honest and looking at your priorities and acting from there. But that's prioritizing your experience.
Yeah.
And like, that's the payoff. It's not this superficial external pay. It's like, no, it's your experience right now. Like, what could possibly be more important?
I know, right?
What could possibly be more important?
Right.
How I think about myself.
Right. My favorite item, control. Second favorite, denial.
Absolutely.
It's just another version of control.
We've got someone in the comment section saying you look like Fiona Apple, and hello from Ottawa. Hello from Vancouver Island.
Hello.
There's also a question about whether or not we've encountered any bears whilst camping. I know for these two, I'll just let them answer themselves, and then we're going to wrap this up and get ready for the call-in show in like 15 minutes. So stick around if you're on Twitch or YouTube Live, because that's where you can participate in the comment section, or you can call in. So any bears so far?
Nope.
No bears on their end. Mind you, they've just recently done a either camping for the first time or
it's been a while.
A return to camping as an experience recently. Me, yes, I've run into bears while camping. And I'm still alive. So, and often, it had nothing to, they just moved on. A couple of times it was a little dicey, but that's just because my own stupidity. But that said, also cougars. Yeah, there's all kinds of
Germany.
stuff going up. Oh, Germany.
Hey.
Hey. And for the listener, somebody just said hello from Germany. I wasn't like, oh,
no, just randomly.
just Germany. just want to give Germany a shout out here. We're going to wrap up here. We'll be back in 15 minutes, and we would love to see you for the call-in show, everyone. Thanks for joining.